Hi, so I'm here with Jay Richardson. He's the editor, musician from Spacetime as my playground, which is, I'm not going to describe it as a music video, as a music shop, because it's not. It's something a little bit different there. So congratulations and welcome to Fusion.
Thank you very much.
And I think it's been nominated in that category, but actually, for me, it was quite a surreal pick. Well, yeah, before I trip over my words, perhaps you can try and explain what this is about.
Yeah, surreal is as intended.
Yeah.
I think music video isn't too inaccurate a term.
I mean, it's beautifully shot and edited, I have to say, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
It's more of a, I guess the video is a little bit secondary to the music in this case. And I think the overall impression that we're trying to give in the video and the music is very similar, one of being slightly surreal. If I can backtrack a bit into the rationale behind the music and behind the video. So a few years ago I started playing the pipe organ, and I now think of it as sort of my favourite place to be is at the organ console, but it's also a severely underrated instrument.
I love the sound of it. So you're preaching because I love classical music, and it's one. I totally agree. I think it's one of those, and not just if you're listening to Bach or something. Whatever it is, I really like it.
Yeah.
And so I'm with you on this. So.
Yeah. Well, a lot of new music is being written for pipe organ right now, and thanks to the efforts of. So I work, for example, at Union Chapel in Islington.
Yeah.
And we have a yearly festival called Organ Reframed, which is just contemporary organ music, lots of electronics, lots of really exciting new work. So I'm trying to feed into that sort of tradition. But I think what I wanted to do with this in making a video for it was to try and explore what it's like to be at the organ console. There are so many buttons and levers everywhere. It kind of feels a bit like being in a sort of spacecraft.
Oh, so honestly, genuinely, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And for me, it's not. I mean, I really do love the music, but it's almost like the art. All playing any instrument's an art form, of course. So it's the art of dealing with all that. But you say it's almost like something out of Star Trek when you look at it, and it's quite breathtaking to see. So, you know, I take my hat off to it, and I really do love the sound. So anyway, I'll interrupt, so carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a really fun place to be as well, and it gives you a tremendous amount of control over the sounds you're producing. So the idea behind the title and the music and the video is to really get across that sense of being in a kind of weightless space, surrounded by these sort of slightly esoteric buttons and flashing lights and all of that kind of thing that you wouldn't necessarily associate with being in a musical space and playing a musical instrument. You know, you might associate it with DJs or maybe with mixing,
it's interesting.
that sort of thing. But people describe the organ as basically a very mechanical, old world synthesizer. And that's really what it is to me. So when we started making the video, we felt that the visual aspects of the pipe organ are really underused in the film world, at least.
So for that, sorry to interrupt. So I'm not going to say you're just editing, because for me, actually, I think editing is probably. There's no filmmakers listen to this, but for me, I think it's the most interesting aspect of filmmaking.
Yeah.
And sound design. They're two things I really love. But I think particularly with editing, you can have a load of people working on a film, which there often is, but all of a sudden, I'm not going to say you're just given a bundle of film, because it's not, you don't turn up in boxes or hard drives. But ultimately, you're calling the shots, right? So you may be a one-man band working on your own. Yeah, you might have the director behind you, because I'm sure you did. But effectively, you're saying to them, well, this isn't working, or actually we need to shorten this. So I find it a really interesting calling in terms of filmmaking, because with all the effort that everyone puts into making the film, you're all going to that tiny little point where, where that person
makes that decision,
and they can spend hours and days doing a shot which they want, and you're going to say, I'm sorry guys, it's just not, it's not adding to the flow. It's just, so sorry, I'm getting away from the question I was going to ask you, which is, I suspect that although you were the editor, actually you had a massive input into how the film looked. So really, you're not just the editor.
Yeah.
So tell me how the collaboration worked, because we knew you were going to you knew you was going to do that, but were you there from the design and the implementation and?
Yeah,
So
no, absolutely. I was obviously there when it was shot. I was playing the organ.
Of course,
the project started with the music, as I guess most music videos do, but there was a particular extra amount of fun in being both the composer. So I wrote the music and I play it on the film, and I also mixed it. So there was a lot of fun in being the composer, sound designer, sort of music supervisor, because of the pieces in several parts, and also the editor, in that I could make editing decisions from a musical perspective instead of a purely visual one. Obviously, the editor always takes the music into account, but having actually written the music myself,
it adds a twist to it. That's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So really, what I'm getting the vibe of here is you had a director and a producer, but really it's all being funneled through, not just the editing, because it's kind of. Is it fair to say it's kind of your baby, or is that?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So why aren't you directing it as well? No, I'm sure the trouble. Well, no, because the trouble is, I mean, my personal opinion is, obviously we get filmmakers, editors, producers, directors, DOPs, but I always feel that when you're spinning all those plates, I don't know, are you stretched?
Yeah.
That's how I feel about this.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm not saying that for a moment.
Yeah.
But the more you take on, the more you've got to juggle with, right?
I think it's a balancing act between having your fingers in all the pies and sort of knowing what's going on in every area of filmmaking, and also, as you say, not having too much to do. I think editing and sound design are a really good combination.
Love them.
Because if you've got the same person doing those two things, you can almost bring them together into the same sort of decision-making process.
Yeah.
A lot of the cuts, a lot of the sort of cutaways, or the places where the luma key really comes up, those editing decisions are made from based on the structure of the music.
And they're done on the fly, because you can't. There must be things you can't account for. There was an interesting. There was a guy yesterday telling me about a really interesting story about editing on their feature film. They shot this sequence and it was either 4 or 6K. It's obviously ultra HD. And he said we had this framed image, and all of a sudden I saw to the left this person making like a face which fitted perfectly with the narrative. So we were able to, because it's such high res, use that as the main focal point. And no one had thought about it, but it just worked really well. So this is what I love about that kind of thing, things that jump out and suddenly happen, which no one was expecting,
Yeah, and the visual side of, I mean, it was difficult to actually shoot, talk about sort of having things in frame that you didn't expect. It's really difficult to shoot inside an organ loft, because they're typically meant for an organist and maybe a page turner.
And when I know it's
right. And in the older ones, you'll have registrants who'll help with the stops, but it's not designed to have a whole camera rig in there.
Yeah, and even with smaller cameras, which they now are, you still got to have someone there. It's still going to be difficult.
And you still got to have the gimbal and all of the cables over it. So, and the lights. That was a massive thing for our film, because it's all artificially lit. So what we did...
Were you all like this? Oh, no, or was it?
No,
there was a way you done this, right?
I mean, you can see on the film I'm perfectly relaxed.
No, not you. I'm talking about the people that were on the crew.
I'm sure the crew were...
About pencil thin or something.
Had pins and needles everywhere. It was a real challenge to incorporate the kind of visual craziness of the chapel and the whole organ console without having a crane cam or a scaffold tower in the chapel. So the way that we did that is by luma keying parts of the other, internal chapel design into it. So shots of the wooden pillars and the sculptures and the organ pipes. So we sort of brought that into the background in a way, and that was, I think, that was the major breakthrough for me in technical terms of shooting in a really tight space. For us, that was a way to give a visual impression of the entire chapel without having to kind of do lots of very complicated technical things to do with getting the camera around the back of the organist.
Yeah, no, it's really well made. So, I mean, obviously you love the musical side. I assume you love editing as well. So I'm going to ask you a bit of a slippery question, a bit of a fun question. So, one day you wake up and you realise You can only do one of those two things.
Yeah.
There is no, the answer you can give me in a moment is not, carry on doing both.
Yeah.
If your life depended on it, you had to choose one, which one would it be and why?
Well,
and bear in mind, whichever one you choose will be very successful and have lots of money.
I know it would always be sound design. I'm a musician.
Right, okay.
And I feel that in the sort of space between music videos and feature films and short films, there's a lot. I think both of those disciplines have a lot to gain from each other. I think for sure music videos could often involve cinematographers early on in the music making process. Yeah. And in fact, the director of this film, Luke Naylor-Perrott, who's a great friend of mine and I collaborate with him regularly, was kind of there at the inception of the piece. So he saw, he heard the early piano demos. He was kind of, he's in Amsterdam right now, but he, I always sent him my first drafts of the music that I'm working on.
Yeah.
So
he composes, well, obviously he composes.
Yeah.
It's a stupid thing to ask, but I mean that's a big thing of yours as well.
Yeah, I'm originally a composer and I'm now sort of moving towards film and sound design. But so Luke was heavily involved early on, and that really allowed him to have a long time to think about the cinematography of it.
Because it looks really nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's really nice. And I know there was a lot of playing. I know you sort of talking about the space you had to work, and you kind of think, yeah, you get it. Because I hadn't really thought about that, but I know the space is like, it's not like a coffin, but it's very small.
Yeah.
And it's
maybe the size of two coffins.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so everyone feels squeezed into it. I mean, you can get in and out easily, but I suppose you've got loads of people in there. It's even so, it must have been, but to give it that kind of look that you gave it, so really well done.
Thank you. Well, we went into the space and then we set up the lights around ourselves, and then nobody could get out until the film was shot, basically.
Oh right, because it was jigsawed in.
Because you'd have to deconstruct the whole lighting rig to get out of the
Brilliant, brilliant. Thanks for that, Joe. That's wonderful.
Thanks for having me.